Well, hey there. It's great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Jonathan Foust here. I will be leading the following meditation and Dharma talk, and I really appreciate you making the time to be here. Hope you find this helpful. We're going to be exploring tonight a little on this dance of cultivating doubt as a doorway to cultivating faith and trust. It's a juicy one, and hope you enjoy it. But first, a big thank you to Glenn Harrison, our producer, to IMCW, the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, for hosting this event. Also, just to say, big thank you to our mindful movement leader, to Rita Moran, and to Ray Manioki, who leads Mindful Dialogue after class. So if you would like to explore the whole experience on Monday night that's offered here, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, you can join Rita. She'll guide you expertly through some mindful movement, bring you into a more embodied space. That'll glide you right here for this meditation and Dharma talk. And then afterward, if you'd like to explore connecting with like-minded people, having some time to reflect on your practice, how you're applying mindfulness in your life, Ray leads a beautiful group afterward. Those links are on my website and on my Facebook page. They're both kind of Zoom classes. So, other than that, I do offer a monthly and weekly newsletter if you're interested. Every month I offer my best photography and a summary of talks and other resources and stuff like that. Also, just to say that once again, if you're a regular listener, this is all offered in the spirit of generosity, so that no one is denied access to these practices and teachings. It's inspiring in a neurotic way to make a living, but I really, I love it, and so do so many other people. Offer it freely. It's just good. So if you feel inspired to help make this possible, to keep rolling this out for people, please feel free to make a donation. Happily accepted and gratefully accepted. And if not, no worries. It's offered freely. One more thing. I'm offering a retreat, a day-long retreat, January 21st. It's a Sunday. It's called The Most Important Thing, bringing mindfulness to intention into the new year. It's kind of an annual retreat where it's an opportunity to reflect on this last year, what worked, what didn't work, and also to begin to sense what's calling you in the new year. What would you need to bring this more forward in your life? That's the intention of the day, and it's one of my favorites. Please feel free to check out that link and join us if you can. It'd be great. I think that's it in terms of announcements and shameless self-promotion. Let's start off with a short meditation. If you like, feel free to reach your arms overhead, stretch up to the left side, to the right side, let out any sounds, kind of get the wiggles out. I just completed a 4-day home retreat, and there's an interesting way to kind of explore moving into meditation I'd like to share with you for this short meditation. If you would, take a moment to, as you close your eyes, just to sense, what is your experience inside right now? What do you feel? What do you notice? Take a few moments just to sense the sense doors, the sounds around you, the air touching your skin, the sense of the breath on the inside. Noting any smells, any lingering taste in your mouth, and sensing just the aliveness of the senses and your body right now. Can you identify anything in the sense field that feels pleasant? Anywhere that feels at ease or free-flowing? Is there anything in the sense field that you sense feels unpleasant, tight or congested, stagnant, throbbing? And with all the aliveness of sensation here, Is it possible to sense that which is aware? In the midst of everything that's changing, there's something that is aware of change. And you might just sense this quality of awareness is most accessible when you relax and when you bring a quality of non-judging awareness, some spacious awareness. And if just for a few moments you might explore, without applying any effort whatsoever, what do you feel? What do you notice? In this sense of spacious allowing, you might very gently bring your attention to the experience of the breath on the inside, or maybe the sounds around you. Just lightly touching into the experience of breath or sound. And you might just sense now, what could relax or soften inside? Could the muscles of the face relax a little bit more? Is it possible to relax the tongue? And to feel the inside of the mouth? Can you feel the weight of the arms? And can you feel this sense of the weight or the heaviness of the arms inviting you into a sense of even deeper relaxation? And can you sense from the inside the soles of your feet and the heels? And with your attention on either the breath or on sounds, very, very lightly, is it possible to experience this inner quality of deep and deep relaxation? And at the same time, the quality of alertness, of aliveness. Relaxed, at the same time, alert. Might explore the following questions as a way of refreshing your practice? Can you sense this quality of deep relaxation inside? Is there anything that could relax even more right now? Anything that could soften? As you bring your attention to the experience of the breath or sound, how intimately can you feel the smallest bit of sensation or movement? Is it possible to sense a quality of spaciousness? Perhaps even moving toward effortlessness, of allowing, of letting be, relaxed, at the same time alert. In these remaining minutes, you might again sense anything that could soften or relax. Anything that could let go right now. Sensing this quality of wakefulness, this quality of the observer. Your capacity to allow and let be. And you might explore again this question, just for this remaining minute. In the absence of effort, what do you feel? What do you notice? Taking this time now for your transition, very gently deepen the breath, sense the quality of presence, and take some time to move and stretch in any way that feels really good for you. No rush. Welcome back. Admiral James Stockdale was a prisoner of war for 8 years in Vietnam. After his return, he was interviewed, and he had a very interesting statement. He said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted that I would get out and turn this into a defining event in my life that I wouldn't trade for anything." And the interviewer asked him, well, who didn't make it out? And Admiral Stockdale said, well, that's easy. The optimists didn't make it out. They were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas, and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and that would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. I'm so struck by that story because there's something here about faith and trust. But there's also something about kind of the middle way of actually balancing faith and trust with doubt and realism. That's what I'd like to explore with you. How do you find that balance of faith and trust in your life? What's the skillful use of each? There's a lot of evidence now that points to our national happiness level dropping in direct relationship to the rise of social media. Through this lens of social media, we're both more connected and we're more disconnected, especially in young adults. This inevitable comparisons to others, the inflation and deflation that comes through how we show up on social media, the endless fractured voices of discord, the half-truths, the clickbait, emotional manipulation. It's a mess. And some people are saying that this rise in social media has created a crisis of faith because everything seems to be kind of machine gunned with this negativity. Trust in the government is down, trust in religion is down, trust in the courts is down, trust in education is down. And it seems to me, maybe my hallucination, but when there's so much information coming from outside of you, it's harder and harder to access your own inner knowing. In the barrage of information, what do you actually know to be true? And it's a classic struggle. External stimulation versus your own inner knowing. And I think in some ways it's super exaggerated right now. So I'd like to talk about the dance of doubt and faith and how when you look closely at them, you see how they're inextricably intertwined. If you want to cultivate more faith and trust in your life, then you need to really examine and look closely at your doubts. So in 4 chunks, as usual, I'd like to talk about first what gets in the way of faith and trust. I'd like to share like different levels, like 3 levels or degrees of faith. A little bit on how an investigation of doubt can perhaps lead you to greater faith and trust. And finally, to talk a little bit about how do you actually cultivate faith and trust in your life, in particular, when it comes to those times when you need to do that leap of faith. So there's a time way back, 25 years ago, I think, when there was this outing of abuse. Sexual abuse, monetary abuse, it was all over the place. Churches, synagogues, businesses, government, something really amazing was happening in our culture. It seemed to me there was a time when this paradigm of power over others simply couldn't stand. And a lot of people were outed. And in terms of the spiritual community world, almost every single ashram in the West fell, truly fell, along with churches and synagogues and everything else. And I was living in one of them that really emphasized devotion. And living in a devotional community really offered a simplicity that was quite wonderful. But the shadow side of that was also an incredible naivete. When I look back at being so deeply immersed in that culture, there was really this devotional emphasis on the teacher. And in lineage traditions, where you're tuned into the teacher and the teacher's tradition, everything gets attributed to kind of the grace of the teacher in the lineage. And part of the joke is that it's sort of like it's the guru's grace when you get diarrhea as a learning opportunity, and it's guru's grace when your diarrhea clears up. So, oh my God. And when I look back, I actually feel some shame for what a true believer I was back then. I have a lot more compassion now. I think in many ways it was a case of misplaced faith or magical thinking, if you will. There's a whole story about the crash and the betrayal, but something happens in our lives when we have these crises of faith. There was definitely something in me that knew that something was off in our particular community, and yet there was also something that stayed loyal, that kept coming back to my sense of faith and trust. And these experiences really inform us. And I actually flashed on a memory as I was thinking about this talk. I think I was maybe 6 years old when I had the mumps. And before my dad left for work, he said he was going to bring me a toy. He was going to get me a tractor. I spent all day waiting for him to get back. I just imagined this red toy tractor he was going to get me and how wonderful that would be and how special I was. And when he got home, he had forgotten. And when I reminded him, I could see the genuine look of remorse on his face. He really felt bad. And I remember that so clearly, my deep disappointment, but also my kind of empathy as I kind of got his regret. And we all have these little moments that form our life. That's a teeny tiny instance of losing faith with a sense of understanding. But there are also so many little disappointments in my life that informed a sense of, you really can't count on anyone. And I think it's a really interesting inquiry. Question for you, just to reflect on just for a moment. In what ways have you been betrayed? In what ways has your trust in the world been fractured? Maybe someone in your family, a relationship, some institution. And if you're comfortable with this question, we'll just take a few seconds. What would you say was your most difficult experience of betrayal or losing trust? Can you recall what it felt like, the pain of it? And along with that is an important question, and that question is, what did you learn? When we experience that pain that comes from distrust, that fracturing of faith or betrayal, it's incredibly difficult. It informs our lives. And if we don't heal that pain, we will live guarded and closed down to possibilities because of that lack of trust. There was so much I loved about living in a spiritual community for a couple decades. I felt we were really helping people, touching people's lives in positive ways. My basic needs were taken care of. I was surrounded by some really sincere and dedicated people. It was creative. I was learning and growing in leaps and bounds. Very challenging life. 6.5 days a week of really focused work, of simplicity, celibacy. And I had envisioned my life as part of this community for the rest of my life. I imagined that I would be taken care of, simply through my dedicated service. And that didn't happen. I'll spare you the whole story, but there was a lot of drama, to say the least, and the whole world came crashing down, and the teacher was asked to leave. The donors who kind of kept us going wanted their money back because the betrayal felt so deep. And we were told it was over. You have to leave. There were about 300 full-time residents in the community who were in total shock. In the Shaker community, when you left the community, you'd get $100, a horse, and the tools of your trade to kind of put you on your way. And I think when you account for inflation, they got a better deal than we got. But honestly, there was some really good news here too, because, as I like to say, the flip side of betrayal is that you get your life back. Suddenly I was on my own. I had to take responsibility for my life. I had to figure out what to do next. I had to come up with a plan and try to live my values in the world and pay my own way. And I grew up pretty fast. I matured in some pretty big ways, and I'm super grateful for that. Mark Twain famously said that if a cat sits on a hot stove, it'll never sit on a hot stove again, but it'll never sit on a cold one either. I think in that same way, it's so important to examine the betrayals in your life and explore what you learned, because your betrayals will burn you, but they will also, with mindful investigation, cultivate wisdom. My favorite awful prayer from yoga is that prayer of, Lord, burn what can be burned, drown what can be drowned, cut what can be cut. For I want to know what it is that cannot be burned, cannot be drowned, and cannot be cut. And I really feel through a disciplined examination of what's true, we become more free. When you align your life to be in enthusiastic cooperation with reality, it's a different experience. So this word faith in Pali is referred to as saddha, S-A-D-H-A. It means to place one's heart, or to offer one's heart. And the question is, how do we do that? And there are different ways that we can offer our heart. I'd like to share with you 3 fundamental distinctions around different qualities of faith. There was a time way back when I made the acquaintance of an older woman who lived in New York and in Santa Fe, kind of back and forth. And she asked me if I'd be willing to drive her car and her dog, and then she'd fly me back and give me some money to do it. She didn't want to put the dog on a plane, and I speak dog, had a great connection with her dog, and so I did that gig for a couple of years. She would kind of pay me to drive her car and the dog. I'd hang out with friends in Santa Fe, and then fly back. And I took this on because road trips are kind of fun for me, or they were then. Kind of cave time, watching the landscape change. And one year I decided, as I was driving from New York to Santa Fe, to take the southern route. I was driving through Arkansas. I remember so well the road. They would just do kind of the slabs of cement with a little sealer, so it's like that bump, 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 bump as you're driving along. And at one point I turned on the radio. And most of the stations were Christian radios, and I thought, let me hear what's the Christian message here. And I am not making this up. This is what I heard from one of the preachers on the radio. He said this quite emphatically, repeating it again and again and in different ways. He said, to be a good Christian, you do not have to think. You do what your minister tells you, and you obey. That's one kind of faith. You don't have to think. You do what the minister tells you and you obey. Some people call that blind faith. And it works for a lot of people. And I'm guessing there have been times in your life when you've adopted this strategy. I have. Blind faith is also known as magical thinking, blind allegiance, or childlike faith. And in essence, it's simply saying, tell me what to believe, and that's good enough for me. I'll live inside of that. And there are a certain percentage of any culture is filled with people who tell me what to believe because I want to belong and I want to know. It serves on some level. It gives you a sense of security. It gives you a sense of comfort. It gives you a sense of belonging. But it doesn't necessarily cultivate waking up to reality. There's another flavor or another level of faith. And I experienced this when I first got initiated to meditation. I learned TM when I was 15. It was like, wow, this is it. Like, just felt this shift. I felt this presence. And immediately it was like, I want to know everything there is about this practice. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm very, very excited. This sense of bright faith. Sharon Salzberg puts it this way. She said, the first dazzling stage of faith is called bright faith. It is likened to sitting in a darkened room with the door closed, shut in and oppressed. Then for one reason or another, that door swings open. We may not see what is outside, but we know there is an outside. That means there is a light, there is possibility. It's a far bigger world than what we might have gotten accustomed to. And for me, that first rush of meditation was that sense of bright light. And as the saying goes, when you meditate, you feel better. You feel your sadness better, your depression better, your anger better. It ushers in a whole new level of experience. Bright faith is an introduction to the path in many ways. I remember, again, back in my spiritual community days, after a few decades or so of practice, cynicism kind of comes in. And I remember in our community, there would be these new prospects. They'd show up so excited to join the community, and they were dead serious. They had enthusiasm, they had high ideals. Some people would kind of shave their heads, they'd don the garb, they'd be grim and pious, and I always had this sense that the more ideal, the more pious, the more grim they were, they would never last. But that sense of bright faith, or enthusiastic faith, if you will, is a wonderful thing. But it'll catch up to you. My first month-long retreat, I remember calling my best friend from college. I said, hey, do you want to do this retreat? It'll be fun. Little did I know that first rush of enthusiasm would be, over the course of that month, a doorway to intense struggle and ultimately really profound, life-changing insights. So bright faith, the enthusiasm, is something really beautiful. And when you stay with it, again, it'll bring you into a deeper sense of reality. It informs your practice, but it's not the end point. So the third quality of faith is called verified faith or mature faith. And this is so cool, because verified faith incorporates doubt. It actually embraces doubt. And in this form of practice, you hear something that may be true. Then you contemplate whatever this may be. You really investigate it. And from your personal deep investigation, the kind of faith that emerges from here is something that you've verified for yourself. It only comes from sustained practice. You keep investigating, you keep looking, and your faith is more organic. It comes from the inside out, and it informs your worldview. The sense of mature faith, of abiding faith, it's a beautiful, beautiful process. One way to try it on, and let's just try this as a little inquiry here. One of the essential teachings in this practice is anicca, or impermanence. And this teaching of impermanence says that everything that is born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. So everything born out of causes and conditions is going to change. This becomes an opportunity to explore. On one level, through blind faith, you say, oh, yes, well, let me memorize that. Everything born of causes and conditions is subject to change. You kind of lock it in, but there's no investigation. You haven't verified it for yourself. You have bright faith, like, oh, that's such a great teaching. Mature faith, verified faith, try it on. So let's try it. If you like, you can close your eyes. You might slow down your breath. And my favorite way to explore this particular teaching is through sound. So you might just imagine you could open up your attention 360 degrees and notice all the sound vibrations. Notice how they change. Notice in your own way that which is aware of the sound and aware of the change. And sense, if you can, the silence that holds the sounds. And you may know or notice that you can't do this better by trying harder. That the more you relax, the more you feel, the more you'll feel the sound vibrations. And the more you relax and widen your awareness, you can sense the space in which the sounds arise. One final question, we'll take just a few seconds for this. As you sense what changes in your experience right now, is there anything that doesn't change? And when you're ready, you can deepen your breath, you can open your eyes. This first characteristic of reality, of anicca, of impermanence, is a very interesting one to look at. When we believe that things aren't going to change, and they do, or we believe things aren't going to change and aren't going to change, and I'm sorry, when we believe they're not going to change and they do, or they aren't going to change and they do, that's where stress and suffering come in. But this question, anything born of causes and conditions is subject to change, opens up the question, is there anything that is not born of causes and conditions, which points toward awareness itself or presence itself? Becomes a very powerful question. So when we hear these little teaching points from the Dharma, the invitation is to really deeply investigate it and to embrace doubt in a skillful way. I was raised in the Quaker tradition, a tradition for which I'm really grateful. In the Quaker tradition, there's no minister, there's no preacher, there's no hierarchy. And there are no words, there are no sermons. In a Quaker meeting for worship, you sit in silence, and only when you're genuinely, authentically moved, you might speak. The simplicity of it is beautiful. It's kind of the Zen branch of Christianity. And kind of because of that training, there's something deeply anarchistic inside me. I have a deep aversion to being manipulated. And what really got me when I started to explore Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy were those magic words attributed to the Buddha. When the Buddha allegedly said, "Don't believe a word I am telling you." And he went on to say, "Do not believe anything just because I said it, because a great elder has said it, because you've read it in a sacred text. Put it into practice. See for yourself what is true." Put it into practice. See for yourself what is true. Can you sense the power of this? Embrace doubt. Don't take anything for face value. The Buddha said, "Be a light unto yourself." He went on to say, "Give yourself fully to a practice. Then evaluate, does it produce a more or less wholesome state?" And this kind of blows me away, because it moves us from blind faith, tell me what to believe so I feel comfortable and safe and I belong, to take responsibility for your own awakening. That's a very different world. And what it leads to is this: faith or trust allows you to enter into a practice or a discipline. And what will sustain you is wisdom. Faith and trust allow you to enter into a practice. What will sustain you is wisdom, the knowledge that comes from that practice. So for me, with a sense of bright faith, oh my God, this stuff is great, I'm going to throw myself into it. What it eventually led to, after a lot of churning and burning, was a deepening sense of wisdom, a deepening sense of what's actually true. So doubt is inextricably tied into faith. And on one level, it's like, well, duh. But it's a lot more sophisticated than what I originally thought. Sort of the yin and the yang. The more you use doubt and apply doubt with wisdom, doubt while keeping your heart open will reveal a deepening sense of mature faith, a sense of verified faith, of what you can verify in your own heart. So this leads to kind of a final thing I'd like to explore, which is, what about the leaps of faith that we take? And each one of us, I know you've taken some leaps of faith in your life, when you just go for it. And before I travel, every time, and now I recognize it, before I go on a big trip, I always will ask myself, why am I doing this? Is this trip really going to make me happy? Ultimately, I've got everything I need right here. There's so much I appreciate about being here. Why go? And then usually about 30 seconds or 3 hours or 3 days into my adventure, it's like, wow, this is fantastic. And a leap of faith is kind of when you just jump into the next thing. For me, joining the Peace Corps, deciding to try to cross the Sahara on my bicycle, moving into a spiritual community, moving out of a spiritual community, getting married, moving to Washington, D.C. These were all leaps of faith. And I have an upcoming one. Our dog died last year, and Tara asked me a number of times, would you like to get a dog? And I would always say no, I'm not ready. Then she asked once, and it finally dawned on me she wasn't really asking me. So we're getting a dog. And again, there's doubt. Like, oh gosh, like, it's wonderful having a dog, but there's just the worry of taking care of the dog and then managing time and schedule and all that stuff. So it's a leap of faith. And I know I love dogs and it'll be great, but there's a leap of faith of saying, okay, let's see what happens. So a question for you. What would you say were your biggest leaps of faith in your life? And if you think of a time when you made a really big leap, what was that like? What helped you make that transition? What finally got you to say, I'm going for it? Either I'm letting go or I'm giving myself to this fully. What I find is whenever there's a leap of faith, there's resistance to the leap of faith. There's something that's calling you, and there's something that's saying, wait a minute. And depending on which one of those has the microphone, that one is going to dominate. And part of the question is, can we listen deeply to both? At some point, we investigate what it is that's holding us back. And what I find for myself is there usually points toward some unmet need. There's something I'm needing or wanting that's not happening. I'm anxious about something in the future. And what I find is if I look really, really closely, what do I have control of? What do I not have control of? I can learn more and more and more. But the more I learn, there's still that sense of, this is completely out of control, but I'm going for it anyway. So we have, again, this dance of, if you're in a leap of faith right now, embrace doubt. What is doubt telling you? How is doubt serving you? It may be pointing towards some unmet need. It may be pointing towards some attachment or some aversion that might benefit from some investigation. Sometimes our leaps of faith are informed by greed, hatred, and delusion. Sometimes those leaps of faith are just from a really deep calling of, I can't say why, but I can't not do this. And I love that definition, which you've probably heard me share multiple times, that my best definition of your path is what you can't not do. After being with it, reflecting on it, sensing into it again and again, you come to that point of like, I just can't not do this. We owe it to ourselves to really give ourselves that time to really deeply investigate, to explore doubt, but cultivate an open heart. So in this practice, we speak of the three refuges. That when you're lost in doubt, the first refuge is awareness itself. To cultivate non-judging awareness, to just kind of establish yourself. Can I be fully present without attachment to the outcome? The second refuge is truth. Can I take refuge on what is absolutely true? Not my preference, not my embellishment, not my fears, but what is true. And can you take refuge in love? These refuges of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha speaks of this quality of awareness, non-judging awareness. Dharma is really taking refuge in what is true. And that sense of truth can be your path. It can be just the willingness to live in alignment with reality. Taking refuge in love is very, very powerful. It's not just kind of love of the practice, it's love in relationships. It's opening to community, to receiving, to intimacy. So it's interesting just to note that cultivating faith is not an end unto itself. Is what launches us into practice, where faith is replaced by knowledge and wisdom. And as I've had the privilege of hanging out with really sincere practitioners, I'm just so inspired by the intention, this deep intention to live in relationship with reality. We all have these moments of the little leaps of faith. For me, just sitting down with this talk, of just trusting, if I just start, I'll get in the flow, and it'll be fine. I find tremendous comfort in the words or the mantra of keep going. That really informs me that when I'm really caught and tight and in fear and in doubt, keep going. When I'm at a place where I think, wow, I've arrived, I think I know, I think I really understand, that's when I really need to keep going. So we're cultivating a balance here. Again, this beautiful teaching of the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. Blind faith, childlike faith, has a beauty to it, and it has a shadow side to it. Bright, enthusiastic faith, in many ways, starts us on our practice. It begins to open us to the challenges of what it means to be fully awake. Mature faith, or verified faith, is this incredibly powerful balance of using doubt as a way to truly explore what is true, and then to stay open to how that truth informs you and transforms you from the inside out. And that is the arising of wisdom, of knowledge, of equanimity, of cultivating a steadiness in the midst of change. So I'd like to close with a reading that, again, I've read this one a lot. It's one of my favorite readings. You've maybe heard this one before, if you've listened to me. And it's about the leaps of faith. And it says it so much better than I could. It's a relatively long reading, so if you like, you can close your eyes. And you might just sense in your life what you're letting go of. And what's calling you, whether you know clearly what that is or if it's just a sense. Sometimes I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to a trapeze bar, swinging along for a few moments in my life, or I'm hurtling across space between trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me along at a certain steady rate of swing. I have the feeling that I'm in control of my life. I know most of the right questions and even some of the right answers. But once in a while, as I'm merrily or not so merrily swinging along, I look ahead of me into the distance. And what do I see? I see another trapeze bar swinging toward me. It's empty. And I know in that place in me that knows that this new trapeze bar has my name on it. It's my next step, my growth, my aliveness going to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on the present well-known bar to move on to the new one. And each time it happens to me, I pray that I won't have to grab the new one. But in my knowing place, I know I must totally release my grasp on the old bar. And for some moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new bar. Each time, I'm filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I've always made it. Each time, I'm afraid I'll miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm between the bars. But I do it anyway. Perhaps this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy, but you do it anyway because somehow to keep hanging on to the old bar is no longer on the list of alternatives. And so for an eternity that can last a microsecond or 1,000 lifetimes, I soar across the dark void of the past is gone and the future is not yet here. It's called transition. I've come to believe that it is the only place that real change occurs. I mean real change, not the pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my old buttons get punched. I have noticed that in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real, and the new one coming towards me, I hope that's real too, but that void in between? That's just a scary, confusing, disorienting nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible. What a waste. I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing. And the bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void, where the real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. With all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but not necessarily accompany transitions, they're still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. And so transformation of fear may have nothing to do with making fear go away, but rather with giving ourselves permission to hang out in the transition between trapeze bars. Transforming our need to grab that new bar, any bar, is allowing ourselves to dwell in the only place where change really happens. It can be terrifying. It can also be enlightening in the true sense of the word. Hurtling through the void, we may just learn how to fly. And you might sense just in these remaining moments this dance of faith and trust, that bright, enthusiastic calling to practice, and then the depth and challenge that arises as you truly, truly give yourself to explore what it means to be awake in your heart, awake in your mind, and awake in your body. And sensing for yourself what it means to take responsibility for your own awakening. As the Buddha said, do not believe anything just because I said it, because a great elder has said it, because you've read it in a sacred text. Put it into practice. See for yourself what is true. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Many blessings in your practice and in your investigation of what you know to be true. Happy trails, and keep going.